Your Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished guests, welcome to today's event, the Global Fund at 20, Changing the Story, 20 years of impact in the fight against AIDS, TB, and malaria. It's co-hosted by the government of Italy and the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. My name is Ridi Kabi, your host in Johannesburg today, and I'm delighted to be in your company. So this year marks the 20th anniversary of the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria. 20 years ago, AIDS, TB, and malaria looked unstoppable, and the world's deadliest epidemics were claiming millions of lives with devastating consequences, particularly in this part of the world where I am, sub-Saharan Africa. Out of that urgency, global leaders came together in solidarity to change the story. It was at the G8 summit in Genoa in 2001, under the Italian presidency, that the creation of the fund was endorsed, and the first time that world leaders united and made a collective commitment to improve global health. Now, to mark the 20th anniversary of the Global Fund, today's event looks back on the impact achieved, celebrates the lives saved, reflects on the lessons learned, and examines how we can protect the gains we've made in the face of COVID-19 to ensure a healthier, safer, and equitable future for all. We are extremely grateful to all our speakers for joining us today, and of course, the continued support and dedication of the Global Fund partners, supporters, and donors who have played a critical role in the tremendous impact achieved over the last 20 years. So now, I'm delighted to welcome an intervention from our first speaker of the day, His Excellency Mario Draghi, President of the Council of Ministers of Italy.
Dear colleagues, Excellencies, in 2001, the G8 set up the Global Fund to speed up the fight against infectious diseases. As the Global Fund turns 20, we can say it's been a resounding success. The number of AIDS-related deaths in countries where the fund invests has dropped by 65%. Deaths for tuberculosis have fallen by 28%, and those for malaria have declined by 45%. The Global Fund has saved around 44 million lives, the equivalent of the population of Ukraine. These results are remarkable, but the fight against HIV, TB, and malaria is not over. The advances we made over the years are now at risk. The COVID-19 pandemic has overwhelmed health systems and diverted resources away from combating these diseases. Last year, at least 1 million people didn't get treated against tuberculosis. HIV testing dropped by a staggering 20%. Progress against malaria stalled. Italy has put global health at the heart of its G20 presidency this year. As vaccination campaigns against COVID-19 proceed globally, we must rekindle the spirit that led to the creation of the Global Fund. We need to strengthen our health systems, enhance access to treatments, encourage prevention, and ensure we provide sufficient, sustainable, and predictable funding to reach these objectives. This is essential for getting the campaign against HIV, TB, and malaria back on track. Over the years, Italy has demonstrated a strong commitment to the Global Fund. Since its creation, we have contributed to it with more than 1.2 billion euro. The next replenishment of the fund must be generous and show true global solidarity. We want the next 20 years of the Global Fund to be even more successful than the past 20.
Many thanks to His Excellency Mario Draghi, President of the Council of Ministers of Italy, for those very, very powerful words. I'm now honored to introduce a message from the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres.
I'm pleased to join in celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Global Fund. Over the past 2 decades, the Global Fund has helped make tremendous inroads in the fight against AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria around the world. The Global Fund is built on the principle of multilateralism and partnership and is rooted in solidarity and hope. Hope to tackle vicious diseases, hope to end human suffering, hope to make a meaningful difference in people's lives. That was the driving force behind the creation of the Global Fund in the wake of the UN General Assembly special session on HIV/AIDS in June 2001. I view the Global Fund as part of the UN family, collaborating closely on the ground to achieve impact at scale. And over the past year, the Global Fund has been a key partner to accelerate a global and equitable response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Together, let us celebrate progress. Together, let us reaffirm the critical importance for global solidarity and urgent action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And together, let us mobilize for a better, healthier future for all.
Thank you very much to His Excellency Antonio Guterres for reminding us of the urgency of accelerating our interventions. Our next speaker is an influential voice in HIV advocacy and at the forefront of the fight, holding seats on the board of the Global Fund and Youth Council. Now, her own personal experiences have led to a passion in raising awareness of understanding and supporting those living with HIV. Hello, and a warm welcome to Joyce Ouma.
Thank you very much. Once again, my name is Joyce Ouma, and I am a 24-year-old activist from Kenya living openly with HIV. First of all, I would like to very much thank the Global Fund and the Italian government for the invitation to join this high-level event on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. As a young woman, as a person living with HIV, and as a member of the civil society, I am humbled that the Global Fund continues to partner with civil society and place us at the center of its programming. As we celebrate 20 years of impact of the Global Fund, I celebrate 44 million lives saved, including my own and the lives of my loved ones. It is commendable that in the past 20 years, the Global Fund has reduced AIDS-related mortality by 65%. What amazing progress. I remember when I was newly diagnosed with HIV at 17, that is 7 years ago. I was in a boarding school and in my final year of secondary education. As is expected, I was in deep shock and I saw my future slowly fading away from me. From the stories I had, to the movies I had watched, to the way the people around me reacted about my diagnosis, I was certain I had not more than a few months to live. My greatest fear, however, was that I was not going to be able to afford a daily pill for the rest of my life. But I was wrong. I was enrolled on treatment and I have never lacked that life-saving pill, even for a single day of my life since then. Living with HIV is not easy. I have faced many challenges through this journey. I have faced stigma. I have had my share of mental health issues. I have had treatment fatigue, fear of opportunistic infections, and many others. But the Global Fund provides the best services that I could never, ever need. COVID-19 has presented unprecedented challenges to the HIV, TB, and malaria programming and has impeded the gains that have been made so far against these diseases. And for the first time in the Global Fund's history, key programmatic results for HIV, TB, and malaria have declined. But on the bright side, COVID-19 has taught us a multitude of health innovations that must be scaled up to regain lost ground against HIV, TB, and malaria. We need to make sure that we leverage investments in COVID-19 to also strengthen national TB, HIV, and malaria programs. In order to meet our targets, we need to increase investments in protecting the human rights of criminalized populations. We need to continue investing more in people-centered programs and initiatives like Challenge Facility for Civil Society and Her Voice Fund, which centers the adolescent girls and young women and is hosted and coordinated by the Global Network of Young People Living with HIV, which is a youth-led network. We need to devise mechanisms that get the resources to the civil society for us to continue doing the critical work that we do. Partners, supporters, and donors have all played a critical role towards the tremendous impact achieved over the last 20 years. And we all must continue the fight and invest in the Global Fund to overcome the challenges and damaging impact presented by COVID-19. We need a fully funded global fund to close the deadly divide between TB, HIV, and malaria commitments and the realities, to end the epidemics and to continue saving millions of lives. I and many others are here because the Global Fund is here. Let us keep saving lives. Thank you.
Joyce, we are really inspired by you, and thank you for sharing your life story with us and for reminding us of the positive outcomes when we collaborate and work together. Thank you, Joyce. Now I'd like to introduce a message from Annie Lennox, the founder of The Circle, NGO, a global feminist organization, who tells us why her experience with Nelson Mandela 20 years ago, at the time of the HIV crisis in South Africa, led her to becoming a supporter of the Global Fund.
The creation of the Global Fund 20 years ago was a defining moment that brought the world together in a way that had never been seen before. At the time, AIDS, tuberculosis and malaria appeared unbeatable and were having devastating consequences. I saw this devastation firsthand. It was almost exactly 20 years ago when I joined Nelson Mandela for the launch of his HIV/AIDS Foundation in Cape Town, South Africa. And I vividly remember Mandela speaking about the pandemic in his country, explaining that women and children are the face of AIDS. Meeting the courageous women and families affected by the pandemic had a profound effect on me. I went on to found The Circle NGO, a global feminist organisation connecting and inspiring women to act and change the injustices and challenges facing disempowered women and girls. I also became a supporter of the Global Fund, a powerful force born of an unwillingness to accept the status quo. By bringing together the skills and knowledge of governments, businesses, civil society, activists, artists, and individuals affected by these diseases, the Global Fund has drastically changed the course of HIV, TB, and malaria, saving an estimated 44 million lives over the past 20 years. This is an incredible achievement, but the fight against HIV, TB, and malaria is far from over, and COVID-19 has reversed some of the huge strides that have been made over the last 2 decades. Today, women and girls continue to be disproportionately affected by infectious disease. Gender inequality, discrimination, violence, and limited access to education fuel new infections. In sub-Saharan Africa, adolescent girls account for more than 25% of HIV infections, despite making up only 10% of the population. And every week, an estimated 5,000 adolescent girls and young women are infected with HIV in East and Southern Africa alone. COVID-19 has put girls and young women even further at risk. We cannot accept that the tools to end these diseases exist, yet hundreds of thousands of women and girls continue to get infected every year. Now is the time to make up lost ground due to COVID-19 and continue the unfinished fight against HIV, TB, and malaria. Now is the time to act.
Thank you, Annie, for reminding us of those sobering statistics, particularly for sub-Saharan Africa. We are all richer for your continued support to the Global Fund. Thanks indeed. Now we'll hear from the Director General of the World Health Organization, that is Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, who through his role has seen firsthand the real difference the Global Fund has made to so many lives.
Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, 20 years ago, the pandemics of HIV, TB, and malaria killed millions of people each year, with devastating consequences for families, communities, and nations. Over the course of the last 2 decades, we have made significant progress, and the Global Fund has played a key role. The Global Fund brought together governments, civil society, communities, the private sector, technical partners and donors to work jointly towards a common vision. As the Health Minister, Global Fund Chair, and WHO Director General, I have had a front row seat to the contribution the Global Fund makes in the lives of children, women, and men all over the world. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused setbacks to our achievements on 3 diseases. But the Global Fund has also been an important part of the response to the pandemic through the Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator and the Global Action Plan for Healthy Lives and Well-being for All. WHO remains committed to our partnership with the Global Fund and to our shared vision of a world free of the burden of AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, with better, equitable health for all. I thank you.
And indeed, it's been a turbulent time the world over. We thank you, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, for your leadership and for joining us as we celebrate 20 years of the Global Fund. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Peter Sands, the Executive Director of the Global Fund for AIDS, Tuberculosis and Malaria, for his opening remarks. Hello and welcome, Peter.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank Prime Minister Mario Draghi and the Government of Italy for co-hosting today's event and for their unwavering support of the Global Fund. I'd also like to thank all the leaders and distinguished speakers joining us today as we celebrate this momentous occasion. This year marks the 20th anniversary of the Global Fund. 20 years ago, AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria appeared unbeatable and killed millions of people every year. The world had lost control of these epidemics, or as Tedros says, pandemics, with devastating consequences for families, communities, and countries. Over the course of the last 2 decades, we have turned the tide against these terrible diseases, reducing infections and deaths dramatically. The game changer was the creation of the Global Fund, born from urgency and a refusal to accept the unfolding catastrophe of HIV/AIDS, the last big pandemic to strike humanity. The creation of the Global Fund was a moment of extraordinary leadership and solidarity, bringing the world together to pool our collective resources, skills, and knowledge, creating a force of unprecedented power to fight the world's deadliest infectious diseases. And to date, we have saved 44 million lives, every one a story. That sense of global solidarity, the spirit of optimism, and the relentless focus on saving lives underpin everything the Global Fund has achieved, changing the course of HIV, TB, and malaria, changing the lives of millions, writing a better story for the future. The Global Fund is a unique ecosystem, uniting governments, agencies, the private sector, civil society, and, crucially, affected communities in pursuit of a common goal to save lives and free individuals and communities from the life-sapping and economically crippling burdens of infectious disease. These partners, supporters, and donors, many of whom are here today, have played vital roles in delivering the impact we've achieved over the last 20 years, and will continue to play crucial roles in sustaining progress towards ending HIV, TB, and malaria. This is a story of global solidarity, of leadership, and of partnership that deserves celebration. But as we turn 20, we face a new and daunting challenge, COVID-19. Our recently published results report illustrates just how badly COVID-19 has pushed us further off track in the fight against the 3 diseases. For the first time in the history of the Global Fund, key programmatic results have gone backwards. The pandemic has disproportionately impacted the people most affected by HIV, TB, and malaria, the poorest, the most marginalized, those without access to healthcare. That's why the Global Fund responded so quickly and decisively to COVID-19. To ensure we leveraged the Global Fund partnership's unrivaled experience, infrastructure, and capabilities to fight the new virus, the labs, disease surveillance systems, supply chains, community networks. and to protect our hard-won gains as much as we could. On top of the just over $4 billion a year we invest to fight HIV, TB, and malaria, we have thus far deployed more than $3.6 billion to help countries respond to COVID-19, making the Global Fund the largest provider of grants for everything other than vaccines, so tests, treatments, oxygen, personal protective equipment. So, as we celebrate 20 years of impact, we are investing more than ever before on HIV, TB, and malaria, and almost as much again on COVID-19. In the fight against such formidable adversaries, there is no middle ground. We are either winning or losing. The stakes have never been higher. To end HIV, TB, and malaria, to defeat COVID-19, and to protect everyone from future pathogens, we must act with speed and at scale, ensuring equitable access to life-saving tools, building more resilient and sustainable systems for health, enabling communities to protect themselves. We must finally finish off these earlier pandemics. We must defeat COVID-19, and we must make everyone safer from future infectious disease threats. These aren't three separate tasks. It's the same people most at risk. It's the same science, health workers, systems, and infrastructure. Now is the moment to turbocharge our fight against the world's deadliest infectious diseases. Let's end HIV, TB, and malaria. Let's defeat COVID-19, and let's protect everyone from the future pandemics we know will come. The Global Fund was a game changer and can be again. Once again, we can change the story. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and for reminding us of the task that lies ahead. And even as we reckon with the mammoth task that lies ahead, I think that it is appropriate to congratulate you and your team for 20 years of saving 44 million lives. Thank you. It's now my great pleasure to introduce to the program a series of high-level interventions from our distinguished speakers, partners, and supporters who've contributed their voices of support for the Global Fund on this very important occasion. Our first intervention is His Excellency Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda, one of the Global Fund's first implementing countries.
Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, for 20 years, the Global Fund has helped to transform the practice of global health by championing the central role of national and community health systems in fighting pandemics. As a result, when the COVID-19 pandemic struck, countries in the developing world were better prepared than we would otherwise have been. I wish to congratulate Dr. Peter Sands, along with current and former staff and leadership of the Global Fund, for the organization's historic achievements. Rwanda was among the Global Fund's very first beneficiaries. In 2003, we received a $48 million grant to strengthen our health facilities to administer antiretroviral drugs and prevent mother-to-child transmission of HIV. This support allowed Rwanda to stabilize the HIV infection rate. Since then, the Global Fund has invested $1.4 billion in Rwanda's health system, laying the groundwork for successful malaria and tuberculosis programs, with real results on the ground. The lesson of the Global Fund's first 20 years is clear. We don't have to accept a status quo which is unacceptable. Working together with a broad collection of stakeholders, we can indeed turn the tide. We cannot allow the progress made in fighting HIV, malaria, and tuberculosis to be undone by the COVID pandemic. Now is the time to deepen our commitment to building resilient national health systems through the Global Fund and other partners. I thank you for your kind attention.
Many thanks to His Excellency Paul Kagame for his remarks. I would now like to introduce our next distinguished speaker, an advocate for the Global Fund. That's Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, the President of the Republic of Tanzania, for her intervention.
Dear colleagues, over the last 20 years, the Global Fund has been the driving force behind overcoming the devastating socioeconomic consequences of HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. On behalf of the people and the government of the Republic of Tanzania, I congratulate the Global Fund for changing the course of HIV, TB, and malaria by saving the estimated 44 million lives globally. Tanzania has benefited from the Global Fund partnership model, where the government, in collaboration with cooperating partners, have established networks to build resilient and sustainable systems for health, not only to end the 3 diseases epidemics, but also to ensure no one is left behind when seeking health care. Like any other sub-Saharan African country, adolescents, girls, and young women in Tanzania are disproportionately affected by HIV, TB, and malaria. Gender inequality, discrimination, and violence fuel new HIV infection in this group. Adolescents and young people account for 1/3 or 30% of HIV new infections in Tanzania, and among this age group, 70% is among adolescent girls and young women. Moreover, COVID-19 has impacted adolescent girls and young women even further at risk. We cannot accept this reality. Tanzania commends the Global Fund for the establishment of COVID-19 response mechanism in May 2020, and we are grateful to have received $112 million through this mechanism to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 on programs to fight HIV, TB, and malaria, and initiate urgent improvements in health and community systems. As we all know, COVID-19 has unraveled important gains made over the last 2 decades, so it is now time to strengthen our collective efforts in working on the mitigation mechanism. No person is safe until all, everyone, and everywhere are safe. No country is safe until all countries are safe. I, therefore, would implore countries to make financial commitments in the upcoming Global Fund 7th replenishment that is to start next year. Funding for HIV, TB, and malaria is still needed, despite that COVID-19 is on top of agenda. Tanzania will join the efforts to make up the grounds we have lost due to COVID-19 pandemic and continue the fight against HIV, TB, and malaria. My government will remain a committed partner to Global Fund and leverage on its tools and experience to achieve victory over HIV, TB, malaria, and COVID-19. I thank you for listening.
Your Excellency, thank you. Thank you to Samia Suluhu Hassan for her leadership and contribution today, and for highlighting the importance of supporting women and girls as part of an equitable response, a very urgent matter the world over. Our next distinguished speaker is a long-standing supporter of global health and of the Global Fund. She is the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Dr. Angela Merkel.
20 Jahre globaler Fonds zur Bekämpfung von AIDS, Tuberkulose und Malaria, das ist ein Jubiläum, bei dem ich große Dankbarkeit empfinde. Mithilfe des Fonds konnten etwa 38 Millionen Menschenleben gerettet werden. Mitgewirkt haben Regierungen, Zivilgesellschaft, Privatwirtschaft, Stiftungen und Betroffene selbst. Deutschland war und ist Teil dieser globalen Verantwortungsgemeinschaft. Doch so erfreulich im Kampf gegen Infektionskrankheiten die bisherigen Fortschritte auch sind, so wenig sind sie eine Erfolgsgarantie für die Zukunft. Vielmehr sind zusätzliche Anstrengungen nötig, um Krankheiten wie AIDS, Tuberkulose und Malaria endlich zu besiegen. Auf dieses Ziel hat sich die internationale Staatengemeinschaft mit der Agenda 2030 verpflichtet. Ein Ziel, das wir mit maßgeblicher Hilfe des globalen Fonds erreichen wollen und können. Die Coronavirus-Pandemie zeigt uns, wie zerbrechlich bisherige Erfolge sind. Weltweit geraten Gesundheitssysteme unter enormen Druck. Der globale Fonds hat auch hier schnell reagiert und insbesondere Länder des globalen Südens bei der Aufrechterhaltung von Gesundheitsprogrammen unterstützt. Ich danke dem globalen Fonds für seinen wichtigen Beitrag und wünsche allen Mitarbeitern und Partnern alles Gute zum 20-jährigen Bestehen.
Our thanks to Dr. Angela Merkel for emphasizing the importance of collaboration and global solidarity in tackling health crises across the world. It is my pleasure now to introduce His Excellency Jean-Yves Le Drian, the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, France, the second largest donor in the history of the Global Fund and host of the 6th replenishment.
Mesdames et messieurs, 20 ans après sa création, le Fonds mondial de lutte contre le sida, la tuberculose et le paludisme, c'est d'abord 44 millions de vies sauvées. Nous avons su mobiliser des moyens financiers considérables. Nous avons su rassembler tous les acteurs engagés dans la lutte contre ces trois fléaux et nous avons réussi. Ensemble, nous avons montré que l'action collective, quand elle va de pair avec une approche par les droits et avec une application sur le terrain des gouvernements et des communautés, elle peut faire reculer les maladies infectieuses les plus meurtrières. Voilà pourquoi la France est très fière d'avoir toujours soutenu le Fonds en tant que membre fondateur et deuxième bailleur historique. Lors de la dernière conférence de reconstitution qui s'est tenue en France, à Lyon en 2019, nous avons porté notre contribution à près de 1,3 milliard d'euros, soit une augmentation de 20%. Et le président Macron a pesé de tout son poids auprès de nos partenaires pour que nous parvenions collectivement à réunir la somme la plus importante jamais levée au profit d'une organisation mondiale de santé, 14 milliards de dollars. Ce succès historique traduit la confiance qui s'est développée autour du fonds et de son modèle unique. Grâce à ces 14 milliards, notre combat se poursuivra pour mettre fin au sida, à la tuberculose et au paludisme. C'est l'objectif que nous sommes fixés. Il est ambitieux, c'est vrai, mais il est désormais à notre portée, pourvu que nos efforts contre la pandémie de Covid-19, qui sont bien entendu essentiels et auxquels le Fonds mondial participe au sein d'ACTA, ne nous fassent pas oublier la terrible dangerosité de ces trois autres pandémies dont nous pouvons, j'y insiste, débarrasser le monde. Au cours de ces 2 décennies, le Fonds est aussi devenu un emblème de ce multilatéralisme par la preuve dont nous avons besoin pour faire face aux défis du monde d'aujourd'hui, notamment sur le plan sanitaire. Nous avons beaucoup à apprendre de cette expérience. Elle nous enseigne notamment que la consolidation de systèmes de santé résilients et durables constitue la base de la lutte contre les maladies infectieuses et que le combat pour garantir un accès équitable aux soins est indissociable concrètement du combat pour les droits humains et l'égalité de genre. Vous pouvez donc compter sur la France pour continuer à soutenir l'action décisive du Fonds mondial, d'UNITAID, d'ONU-SIDA et de l'OMS. Je vous remercie.
Thank you. Many thanks to His Excellency Jean-Yves Le Drian for emphasizing the importance of multilateralism. But thank you for France's ongoing support of the Global Fund. Please now welcome Gail E. Smith, Coordinator for Global COVID Response and Health Security at the U.S. Department of State. Now, the United States is the Global Fund's largest donor, and PEPFAR, PMI, and USAID are essential partners to the Global Fund in the field.
Hi, everybody. I'm delighted to be here with you today to celebrate 20 years of the Global Fund's progress. That's 20 years of progress in the fight against AIDS, TB, and malaria, and it's a struggle we've been thrilled to support. Over the last many years, the United States has provided over $17 billion to the fund as its leading donor. But we're also a key and important partner, and we see the Global Fund as one to us, not only in fighting these 3 diseases, not only through the cooperation between our teams on the ground, but also now in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic and the work we're doing together to build the global health security we need over time. And this is one of the key things about the Global Fund. It is keeping up the fight against HIV/AIDS, TB, and malaria, and at the same time, leveraging its experience, its capabilities, its knowledge, and its commitment to support people as we live through an unprecedented global health threat. We're delighted to continue to support the fund. You are a critical partner to all of us, and we're particularly pleased that the Congress provided to the Global Fund $3.5 billion as part of the American Rescue Plan to support the Global Fund's role in the COVID-19 fight. President Biden this week hosted a summit on ending the pandemic. The Global Fund was a key partner there, has been for years, is today, and will be into the future. Congratulations. We really, really appreciate everything you do, and we're determined to work with you till we get the job done.
And we appreciate your support. Thank you very much, Gail, for your remarks. And finally, please welcome His Excellency Kimihiro Ishikani, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary from the Permanent Mission of Japan to the United Nations.
Well, thank you, Madam Moderator. We would like to thank, first of all, His Excellency Mario Draghi, President of the Council of Ministers of Italy, for his opening remarks, and the government of Italy for realizing this important event with the Global Fund. Well, 20 years ago, when the Global Fund was established, the spread of the HIV/AIDS pandemic was undermining the foundations of the world's economy and society. And now, the world is facing a new pandemic of the coronavirus. The Global Fund was established as an innovative public-private partnership in the wake of the G8 Kyushu Okinawa Summit in 2000. It introduced a new mechanism to enhance the impact of infectious disease control and a new governance, which included the participation of beneficiary countries and civil society in the decision-making process. During the past 20 years, the Global Fund has not only hampered the spread of the three major infectious diseases, it has also made great contributions toward strengthening the entire health system, which is the foundation for other infectious diseases control measures. The innovations and contributions of the Global Fund are once again highly appreciated as we face the current COVID-19 pandemic. The fund has fostered health delivery system, including information system and supply chains, the empowerment of the health workforce, and sustainable financing. Such assets are now being utilized to great effect in the fight against COVID-19. It is also worth noting that the Global Fund has played a vital role in ACD Accelerator. Presently, global attention is focused on the response to the COVID-19 crisis, as well as on strengthening our preparedness against future pandemics. As part of efforts by the Global Fund over the last 20 years to strengthen global health security towards achieving universal health coverage, it has built mechanisms to enhance support systems, return on investment, and sustainability. I hope that the Global Fund will continue to play a leading role by taking advantage of the lessons it has learned and the system it has fostered. Japan will actively contribute to strengthening the global health architectures towards achieving universal health coverage based on the concept of human security. And we will continue to support the measures taken by the Global Fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much for that renewed commitment and enthusiasm, Your Excellency. Now, at a time when we know COVID-19 has dramatically impacted the work of the Global Fund, it is more important than ever for a global push to save lives and to protect progress against HIV, TB, and malaria. Let's now take a look at the challenges we are facing today. course, we are celebrating our 20th anniversary of the Global Fund, but that video reminds us of what has been lost as a result of COVID-19, and it makes collaboration and interventions even more urgent. I'm now delighted to introduce the last part of the program today, a discussion with some of the key partners and supporters of the Global Fund who have joined us on the journey to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. A warm welcome to Olivier Francois, CEO of Fiat and Arbath and Global CMO Stellantis. We also have Draghi Ghosh, President of Global Policy and Advocacy at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's a pleasure to welcome Rachel Ong, Regional Coordinator of GFAN Asia Pacific and co-facilitator of C20 Global Health Working Group. And of course, Winnie Byanyima, Executive Director, UNAIDS. And of course, joining us once again on this panel, Peter Sands, Executive Director, the Global Fund. Thank you so very much all for joining me in this very important panel discussion. Let's get started with the question, and I'd like to come firstly to you, Olivier. It's really great to have you here today. Fiat is the largest automobile manufacturer in Italy, known for its style and design credentials, but to be honest, not many would associate you with global health. Can you tell us a bit more about Fiat's entry into this space through your new RED partnership?
Sure, Rudy, thank you. So first, let me say that I'm really humbled for the opportunity to speak here today. Actually, I spent the last couple of days wondering why a car guy would even be part of such a high-profile event. This being said, yes, Rudy, you're right. So Fiat is the largest manufacturer in Italy, and we're also part of a big group called Stellantis, the mother company that includes legendary American brands such as Jeep, Dodge, Ram, etc., and European brands, including French brands and German brands. So needless to say, for a group like ours with presence all around the globe, this fight is our top priority. And this is why at an early stage, we started producing masks and respirators in our plants. So now, 18 months later, obviously, we embrace the opportunity brought by RED, to keep tackling the problem, but now in a way that's totally fresh and still relevant for the customer. So concretely, what are we going to do? So we picked 3 brands of our group, Fiat, obviously, in Europe, but also in my CMO capacity, I worked with the Ram and the Jeep leaders to have them join the fight on the US side. Then for each of these 3 brands, we created a RED special car, RED special edition, with special colors, interiors, features, and each has a very impactful advertising message, hence some significant media money spent to amplify the message of RED. And last, through the purchase of these special cars, SUVs, trucks, we will deliver a minimum of $4 million over the 3 years of the commitment to support the work of the Global Fund. I am convinced, if I may, that this money will drive real impact on the fight against pandemics.
That's fantastic news, Olivier, fantastic. And it's great to see the private sector stepping up and playing a very important role in the fight against pandemics and ensuring a healthy and equitable future for all. So tell me, what specifically drew you to RED and the Global Fund?
Yeah, that's a good question. We would not be here without RED. And you know, supporting RED with not 1, but 3 brands on 3 years and on 2 continents, well, this can sound like a bold decision, you know, kind of going all in. But, you know, this is an approach that is not totally new to us. As an example, last year, when we launched the new 500, we decided to go all in too. It was not a RED all in back then, but a green all in. I mean, we decided to go all electric and only electric with our most popular model. So I don't know if there are gearheads in the room, but they would know that 500 is extremely iconic as a car. So when we announced that from now on, we would go only electric, no petrol engine anymore for 500, you see what I mean? So people said, wow, this is bold. So yeah, it is bold, but it's also ethical and true to our roots. Fiat, you know, is a very democratic brand, and our conviction is that it's only green when it is green for all. So that's our objective, change the paradigm of sustainability for the few to sustainability for all. So here we are a year later, and we took one more step on this ethical path. Our last fruit is not just green, but it is also red. And look, I personally think that as disruptive as it looks, it's a sound business decision, and this for two reasons. Reason one, there is no healthy business in an unhealthy world. So whatever can help to address global warming and pandemics is to be considered as a sound business investment. This is why we now go all in all electric against climate change and all in all red against pandemics. And reason two is Fiat DNA. I alluded to it earlier, and especially the 500, but it's about an Italian art de vivre. I'm French, so I don't think it's too self-serving to state that Italy is all about the pursuit of happiness, about a passionate quest of beauty, about lightheartedness, about joy, togetherness. The people of Italy gave it a name, actually. They call it Dolce Vita. So you see, I am to some extent in the business of the Dolce Vita, more even than in the car business. I'm in the business for spreading joy as a pure form of medicine, an antibody for misery, which leaves us with no other choice than fight against global warming and pandemics. I love the statement this little red car will make. It's electric to protect the planet, and it's red to fight the pandemic. It is maybe one of the most ethical cars on the planet. Now, if you take Jeep, it's a brand that's all about freedom. Jeep is an epitome of freedom and adventure, unrivaled. But where is freedom in a lockdown? So Jeep, like Fiat, has solid reasons to join hands with Red. In this case, the Red mission is not to seek life and freedom on the red planet in a remote future. Our mission is to deliver here and now on planet Earth. And last, you have Ram, our great truck brand. So our slogan, is, which is also our purpose, actually, is built to serve. So it makes total sense here to evolve, built to serve into born to save. You see, and to wrap this, I wanted to go back to my initial question. What is a car guy doing in such a high-profile event? Well, I'm here because I want to pitch that sustainability and health have a legitimate place in our corporations' business plans. And I want to pitch that meaning and relevance have their place in our marketing plans, such as this little green car going red with a noble mission to be a vehicle for Bono and Bobby's message in action. So to wrap this, I'd like to say that I hope to see many of these little red, green little cars on our streets, not just because of the market share, not just because of the money that will be raised for a good cause, but because every time you see one of these cars, you'll hear them saying something. You'll hear, we are not powerless. We can all do something. We all can drive change. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Olivier. Thank you. We are very enthused by your message. And of course, reminding us, once again, there's no healthy business in an unhealthy world. Thank you, Olivier. Gagi, let me come to you. As we've heard from previous speakers, COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on the gains made, right, in the fight against AIDS, TB, and malaria. Prior investments in health system strengthening laid the groundwork to help low and middle income countries respond to the crisis. But still, programmatic results went backwards for the first time ever. What are your thoughts on the role that the private sector and philanthropy has to play in bringing innovation to the fight against these epidemics? I mean, has this been the wake-up call that they needed? Have they stepped up? And where do you see philanthropy's role in tackling future pandemic preparedness? Big questions there.
Well, thank you for them. They're super important. And thank you for having me on this great panel. I'm so happy to go after Olivier because I think he captured exactly where I would start. All the enormous accomplishments that we heard about today just wouldn't have been possible without one really essential ingredient at the fund's founding, and that's ambition. The fund has made such important strides because its founders dared to think we could galvanize resources, mobilize action on the scale necessary to tackle these pandemics. And we need that level of ambition still today, especially, as you say, in the face of setbacks that we have seen this year. Since its inception, I think the Global Fund has really lived in theory and in practice public-private partnership, not just in name, but in resources, in stakeholders, and in innovative ideas to combat these diseases. To start on resources, the fund's various partnerships with philanthropies, companies, have helped raise over $3.3 billion. And we've been incredibly proud to be a part of that commitment. But it's also true in innovation, something that, as we heard and know, the private sector really does best in developing new ways to deliver life-saving health products, to tackle logistics challenges. We heard about RED, which is one of my favorites. In addition to Fiat, partners like Apple and Vespa have created these iconic products that have not just raised funds for the Global Fund, but kept these issues top of mind for people all over the world. It's also true in financial innovation and delivery innovation. We're part of a partnership for TB treatment in India that has combined public government, World Bank money with philanthropic money to make sure that we are continuing to advance TB treatment in a very high burden place. We have partnered with the private sector to develop new bed nets that combine two insecticides to stay ahead of mosquito control against malaria. And COVID, of course, as you said, has demanded more ingenuity from all of us. Not a wake-up call because we've been asleep, but a wake-up call because the fight continues. Just to give you an example, a well-known supply chain initiative driven by the private sector is Project Last Mile. During COVID-19, the pandemic, we've helped to catalyze local production of PPE and develop targeted communications on COVID-19 prevention. And this is the kind of rapid response and rapid adaptation that has helped get critical medicines to those who need it during the pandemic. So on behalf of the Gates Foundation, we certainly look forward to working with a range of partners as broad as the mission of the Global Fund is large. It's time for the private sector to act again to show its incredible value in this mission.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Kagi. Now, moving to you now, Peter. 2 decades ago, AIDS, TB, and malaria appeared unstoppable, as we've heard, killing millions and destroying communities. The Global Fund was born out of that global health crisis, right? Prompting global leaders to take urgent action. So 20 years on, 44 million lives have been saved. How has that been achieved? And in your opinion, what have been the key elements that have driven most change? And where could we improve?
It's a great question, and there hasn't been a single element, a silver bullet, as it were, but it's been the combination of different factors that has driven the success of the Global Fund. And I would start actually with one that is illustrated by this panel, which is that the Global Fund is an intense collaboration between very diverse partners. It brings together a fantastic range of perspectives, expertise, and assets, including, most crucially, those directly affected by the diseases. Sustaining such intense multi-stakeholder collaboration is hard, but it's also crucial to what's been achieved and crucial to our future. Underpinning that partnership is another key factor, which is true global solidarity, a commitment to leave no one behind. It was Bill Gates, I think, who actually said something along the lines of the Global Fund was one of the kindest things humanity had ever done for humanity. And it's also been one of the most practical things, one of the most powerful ways of turning the sentiment of solidarity into something that can actually save lives. Another critical factor, I think, in the success of the Global Fund and in our success in the future will be and has been an unremitting focus on tackling inequities. Leaving no one behind is central to the Global Fund's approach. And we know this doesn't happen automatically. So we need to identify and address and remove economic, human rights, and gender-related barriers to accessing health services. And as we are seeing again with COVID-19, infectious diseases thrive on and fuel inequities. We have to deal with them. Another key factor in the success of the Global Fund has been determined and sustained action to ensure equitable access to innovation. Indeed, getting equitable access to antiretroviral therapy for HIV/AIDS was one of the key drivers behind the creation of the Global Fund 20 years ago and was a true game changer. But we need to keep doing this, and we must make it happen faster for HIV, TB, and malaria, and for COVID-19 as well. A further critical factor, and one thing I think that has been distinctive in the approach of the Global Fund, has been about putting communities at the center. You'll never defeat a deadly infectious disease without the active engagement and leadership of those most affected. In fact, we need to do that even more than we've done thus far. And then finally, it's critical to keep a relentless focus on outcomes. And by outcomes, I mean saving lives and reducing infections. What it all comes down to is saving lives and allowing people to live healthy and productive lives. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Peter. I'm just hearing a lot of themes, but what stands out the most is inclusion and recognizing the agency of communities and leaving no one behind. Thanks indeed. Rachel, let me come to you. You are currently regional coordinator of the Global Fund Advocates Network Asia Pacific and co-facilitator of C20 Global Health Working Group. And you were, for many years, a member of the community's delegation on the Global Fund board, working closely with the very communities that we're talking about, communities that are most affected by AIDS, TB, and malaria. Can you now speak to why the community-based approach that the Global Fund has pioneered over the last 20 years works, and why is the role of communities critical if we are to end the epidemics by 2030?
Thank you so much. I think Peter has actually spoken a lot to the importance of communities and civil society. And I think the Global Fund is an institution with a proven track record that has been critical in improving the impact of programs that serve key vulnerable and excluded populations in country programs it funds. Since 2007, countries have been able to access funds from the Global Fund for community system strengthening within disease-specific funding. And through this, the Global Fund has been able to strengthen community system strengthening and community engagement by facilitating opportunities for communities and civil society to engage and to play their parts even more effectively in the response. And more importantly, institutionalize this participation. So why is community and civil society engagement critical? Firstly, the role of communities and civil society involvement in the Global Fund's partnership model cannot be understated. This is a place where key populations, communities most affected by the 3 diseases, and civil society organizations have a meaningful role with voting rights on its board. We, as communities and civil society living with and affected by the 3 diseases, are the best placed to speak for ourselves and to be part of decision-making processes that impact our lives. And we wish that more institutions could take a leaf out of the Global Fund's decision-making process and governance structure. Secondly, communities expand the reach and uptake of formal health facilities and empower people to advocate for their rights while holding governments and other stakeholders such as private sector accountable, because people's lives must come before profit. Thirdly, we have an indispensable role, not just being able to reach and mobilize people, effectively manage, deliver, and scale up treatment, care, and support services to our peers, but most importantly, to advocate for an enabling environment and programming to reduce human rights and gender-related barriers, as Peter has said, to accessing health services as we continue to monitor these commitments and implementation of programs.
Thank you so very much, Rachel. Now we're coming to you, Winnie. UNAIDS has been at the forefront of the fight against HIV for so many years and an important partner of the Global Fund. So can you tell us about the hurdles that have been overcome to get to where we are today, and what role equal access, something that I know you are very passionate about, what role equal access to prevention, diagnostics and therapeutics has played in the progress we have made so far in the fight against HIV? I mean, how should these lessons be applied to current and future pandemics?
Thank you, Reddy, and thank you, Peter, and colleagues on the panel. I'm delighted to join you and recognize the Global Fund's 20 years of impact in the fight against HIV, TB, and malaria. You asked me about hurdles, and there have been many. But at every step, we have overcome these hurdles together. And that's the key message from all the fellow panelists. When the Global Fund Board was established 20 years ago, it advanced the example from the UNAIDS board that civil society had to be represented at the governance table. When the Global Fund supported the creation of country coordinating mechanism, critical multi-stakeholder structures at the national level, it was based on this same multi-stakeholder approach that governments, the United Nations, empowered communities have to be united and hold each other accountable at the country level for overseeing implementation of programs. When we, UNAIDS, publish our annual global report, the data is used by governments, Global Fund portfolio managers, and even us at UNAIDS to identify inequalities, refocus, and better target resources, always working hand in hand with communities. So the lessons we've learned, Peter has named them. Bold political leadership, critical, global solidarity, and a global plan. Global solidarity behind a global plan with targets. A commitment to human rights is critical. Empowered communities leading services, Peter has explained that, and of course the multisectoral approach. Today, just a second. Sorry, I got a bit lost here. I missed out two important ingredients here. Good data. Good data is critical to support, to sharpen our focus, to get the job done. And as I said, a global plan with targets, helping countries to fight on and move at the fastest pace. You asked me about equal access to prevention, to diagnostics and therapeutics. We have achieved what many once said was impossible. Of 38 million people living with HIV today, almost 28 million of them are accessing life-saving antiretroviral therapy. And while AIDS is still unfinished business, we have cut the rate of new infections by more than a half and averted almost 17 million deaths. We got here by ensuring generic production of antiretrovirals in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We got the science to the people who need it most. We upheld people's rights to health without discrimination and equal access to health technologies. We achieved that. When HIV drugs first came into being on the market, they cost $10,000 a year per patient. And they were only made by a handful of companies. Supplies were limited and prices were high. Today, high quality HIV treatment in the poorest countries like mine, Uganda, is just $75 a year per patient. That happened because there was a concerted effort, global effort, to shift to global generic production. Today, it has become commonplace that major HIV drug makers introduce their new drugs in the global north, along with licenses for production in the global south. It's the norm. It's not perfect. Many middle-income countries are still left out, but it's saving lives. It saved millions of lives. Unfortunately, this model that made HIV drugs globally available isn't being used for COVID-19 vaccines. Wealthy countries are talking about the third booster shot, while in Africa, less than 4% of the population is fully vaccinated. Is another moral failure. This successful model is also not being mobilized for some of the newest HIV treatment and prevention options, like some of the long-acting antiretroviral formulations. They would be a game changer, for example, for adolescent girls and young women in Africa to prevent HIV infection among them, which is so high. But it isn't happening yet. Companies and governments in Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and Caribbean have the expertise. They have the funding in place, but what's missing is the know-how, the recipes for making these long-acting treatments. This is driving huge inequalities in access to prevention and treatment options and undermining the progress we could make towards ending HIV/AIDS. So our last word, we have the lessons. We know what works. We need now to increase the momentum for change. We need us at UNAIDS, 25 years of UNAIDS, 20 years of the Global Fund, fighting HIV, TB, and malaria. Together now, we can leverage the lessons we have learned, and we can respond and end these pandemics and also build the capacity of countries to be prepared for the next pandemic. Thank you so much. For me, this is a moment of hope because we are together and we know what to do.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Winnie, for reminding us of inequality as well and how we need to respond to this with urgency. Rachel, I have time for just one more question, and it is about human rights. A key driver in the fight against HIV, TB, and malaria has been overcoming human rights barriers. How important was this in changing the trajectory of the three diseases? And as we address current health challenges with COVID-19, where does human rights fit into this?
Thank you so much. And I think Peter and Winnie have spoken a little bit about it. And I just have to say that the inequalities that we have seen exacerbated by COVID-19 was in fact experienced and made worse during COVID-19 by key populations most impacted and affected by the three diseases. And these are unfortunately inequities in healthcare, gender and racial inequalities, denial of human rights, discrimination and national laws and policies that continue to discriminate against vulnerable populations such as migrant workers, internally displaced people, and refugees, and at the same time criminalize sex workers, LGBTQI communities, people who use drugs, and people living with HIV, and in some cases TB. Thus, to ensure that we leave no one behind, laws, policies, and services need to urgently empower those that are being left behind to eliminate inequalities and to protect the rights and health of these populations and communities. And to do that, decriminalization is essential. And we have to adapt health responses in placing the last mile first so that health responses place people at the center meaningfully through evidence-informed, rights-based and gender transformative approaches. And I share Joyce's call in her earlier intervention that we need to ensure that the Global Fund is fully resourced and to continue its fight against the 3 diseases as epidemics. COVID-19 has greatly thrown us off track. And even though we have been thrown off track, the Global Fund has exhibited so adeptly with grant flexibilities and the COVID-19 response mechanism to invest further in communities and civil society, as well as health system. We need to reverse the impacts and devastation caused by COVID-19 for us to get back on track. And 20 years on, the Global Fund continues for us, communities and civil society, to have a critical and irreplaceable role in scaling up investments in the 3 diseases, including those needed in community rights and gender. So now is the time to act. We only have 8 years left to 2030 to close the deadly divide for HIV, TB, and malaria.
And we dare not be complacent there. Thank you so very much, Rachel. Thank you to all of you for contributing to our discussion today. While we celebrate the work that you are doing, while we took some sobering landscape analysis, I think we also achieved something here today from all your messages. I'm talking about the heads of states and the leaders who made an intervention today, but also you, our panelists. You really served to put a mirror to humanity, to remind us that exclusion, poverty, inequality, these are policy choices. These are moral failures. We dare not embrace these. This is a challenge for us to rise to the occasion. Thank you so very much for your expertise, your contributions, and your hearts, I think. Now, as we draw this session to a close, I'm delighted to introduce the chair of the board of the Global Fund, Dr. Donald Kaberuka. A warm welcome to you, Dr. Kaberuka. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Reggie. Your Excellency, friends, ladies and gentlemen, this has been a very rich, constructive conversation. The word I had frequently mentioned has been that the Global Fund has been a game changer, a force for good in global health. I think Winnie has summarized it very well, a moment of hope, because we are together and because we know what to do. So let me express my thanks to all of you, beginning with Prime Minister Mario Draghi and the government of Italy for hosting this event and for the support to the Global Fund. I want to thank all the leaders who spoke today, all the speakers for your participation and for amplifying through an influential voice the work of the Global Fund. The work of the Global Fund has benefited enormously from your active participation today. As many people have said, the fund is a testament to the power of partnership. Partners who are here today. A partnership which over the last 20 years has been, as many have said, a game changer. The number of 44 million lives has been mentioned, but has been more than simply saving lives. It has saved livelihoods, it has saved economies, it has saved nations in many parts of the world. But again, as we heard today, there are challenges ahead, the decline in programmatic indicators, reduction in funding. And again, as we heard today, the complications brought about by COVID, where the millions pushed back into poverty, inequalities exacerbated, society's most vulnerable being affected, and probably undermining the health systems and social cohesion as well. So there's much to do. There's much to do. There's, however, good reason to believe that experience gained over the last 20 years will stay us in good faith tomorrow. After 20 years, of which you can be proud, we now realize, as Mandela would have put it, that there are many more mountains to climb. The battle is not won. The reverse of gains is real. It lurks around the corner. But we must keep up the fight, keep our eyes on the horizon, the year 2030. It shows that the 3 diseases can be beaten within the context of robust health systems. We have come this far thanks to our collective determination, focus, and partnership. But the ground landscape is much more complicated, as many of you have said, and hence we must intensify our efforts. Very shortly, in a few months, the next replenishment of the Global Fund will be undertaken. It is my hope and expectations that we shall rise to that moment to ensure that the fund is well resourced for the challenges ahead. I want to thank you all for your time today, for your counsel, for your advice, ideas, and above all, for your commitment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaberuka, for those powerful words to close what really has been an incredible, empowering, and inspiring event. We've heard today from so many partners, supporters, and donors of the Global Fund who have played a critical role in the tremendous impact achieved over the last 20 years. It has really highlighted just what can be achieved when the world comes together in solidarity. And in doing so, the Global Fund has changed the course of HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria, changing the story for millions of people all over the world. Your Excellencies, ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished guests, many thanks to you all for joining us today. Goodbye.